particular group that Sue was mentoring was all around online learning approaches. So Sue, do you want to introduce Asmol and Nora and their project?
Okay, so hello everyone. So nice to be here, and we've all managed to get into the room. Well done. So I'd like to introduce Asmol and Nora first of all. They work for United Colleges Group in London, which is a large college group, and they're based at City College, Westminster, in a very fancy building, as you'll see from Asmol's background. And they are both advanced practitioners. Like all of us, the action research went slightly off track because of COVID and lockdown, but luckily online learning is really important, become really important over this last year as we've all moved to remote learning. So I'm sure you'll all be interested about what they've got to say. So I'm going to hand over to Asmol and Nora. Asmol's going to share his screen. We've got some slides, and as Claire said, let's keep it informal, ask questions. And Asmol, I'll just give you a heads up if you go a couple of minutes for the end. Is that all right?
That's fine.
If you get carried away. So Asmol, Nora, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Hi, everyone. So thank you, Asmol. You can see the screen. As Sue said, we're from United Colleges Group, Central London. Our particular campus is based at Paddington. And so our project was about effective teaching online through reflection, collaboration, and expert input. Could you go to the next slide, please, Asmol? I sound like that guy from Sage. Next slide. And I am Nora, and I was the project lead.
I'm Asmol, I'm the deputy lead.
Hi, Asmol.
Right.
And that's us. That's our big fancy college. We're a large inner city newly merged group that we across 5 campuses. And of course, COVID informed our project. So we had to make modifications in order to meet what we needed. Teachers were struggling to deliver effective and engaging lessons. And across a huge group like that, we had a very different level of expertise across the English department. And so it did, of course, result in large declines in attendance and engagement across the English department.
So what we did, based on our research, we developed a series of training sessions. Basically, what was the issue was our teachers were really good at teaching face-to-face. How do we transfer that knowledge, that expertise to online? So we came up with a series of sessions. The first one was making the best use of online Teams, Microsoft Teams. Teams was a new concept, a new app for a lot of our teachers, and we had to really go and show them how to use it properly, because it's just a lot of it's just emergency, a lot of it's just a lot of confusion about what we can do with Teams, what's not possible, what's possible. So we had to spend a lot of time going through a step-by-step guide on how to use Teams. We also used Microsoft OneNote to capture learners' progress, right? So traditionally what they would do is the learners would finish their work, they would email it back to us. And that wasn't the best way of capturing the learning, right? It's not the best way of tracking the progress they're making. So we developed a session teaching the teachers how to use OneNote to capture learning. We also looked at deeper learning in the blended learning environment. All right, so stuff like how do we make sure they are really learning in the online learning environment, especially when they have the cameras off, or especially when they are, they seem to be disengaged. So how do we make sure that deeper learning is taking place? And also we looked at retrieval practice for deeper learning. With online learning, we've got lots of apps, right? And that makes it really good to test learning and to make sure like what they've learned has been retained. Nora?
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's pretty obvious why we did it. We did it because as learning coaches, we wanted to research effective strategies to support our colleagues at this stressful time. And when Asmol was just talking there, it occurred to me that we also went on a massive learning curve because we had to learn a lot in order to do this. So it was very timely, actually, that we were doing this project. We also wanted to improve our own practice, of course, in online delivery and share this across the group. And as it was a totally new pedagogical experience for all of us, it was, you know, a perfect time to establish a collaborative framework informed by teachers' individual experiences. So we did a lot of surveys, a lot of professional discussions with them, and that informed where we went afterwards. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so how we did it, right? We use Microsoft Forms to survey staff and establish baseline competencies to inform training requirements, right? So what we tried to do is we wanted to not give them something that they already knew, right? So we wanted to establish what did they know about this these apps and these approaches. So we used Microsoft Form, which was quite effective because it gives you all the data, and you can put all the data in Excel and look at it carefully. And it's just a really, really good way of capturing, asking questions, capturing the data. We also created and delivered a rolling program of CPD, modeling good practices. So what we did was, when we did a session on OneNote, we used OneNote to deliver that session. So whatever the session we did, we used it to model good practice. So if you use Teams, we used breakout rooms to, to establish and show how to do it. We surveyed students and teachers to measure their improved experience of online learning. Again, we use Microsoft Forms to, capture the learning, capture the progress they're making. And we both reflected in practice as well as on practice. For example, creating a PLC team and OneNote specifically for peer collaboration and, to share potential hazards and easy wins. Nora, have you got anything to say on this?
No, I just think that that final point there was really useful for collaboration, and it really helped us stay in touch throughout the project while we were in lockdown, which was incredible because we had asynchronous and synchronous conversations going on all the time, and that was brilliant. So it was an excellent tool for collaboration. Next slide, please. This is what we found. After training, teachers felt so much more confident, and they still do, using online technology to deliver a very high level of quality, high quality pedagogy. And next point, please, Asmol. And that was very timely because we received a monitoring visit from Ofsted. So they confirmed this during lockdown. They came during lockdown. We all got visited in our online classrooms. And we were very, very proud of the fact that they commented very positively on our online provision. So it was very good affirmation. And then the students' engagement, of course, it's all about the learners. And at the end of the day, we were incredibly proud that we could measure it. It was there in front of us for all to see that their engagement was so much more improved. And we just had to look at the registers, never mind their surveys and feedback and their own comments. But it was very clear from our registers, the vast improvement in levels of engagement and their punctuality. Feedback was brilliant. They loved it. Some of them just didn't want to come back into the classroom, actually, afterwards. It was very pleasing.
So what the teachers have said, those who took part in this, the Action Research Project, some of the comments they've made, I mean, they were all enjoyed it. They've all learned something, right? So I've just chosen 3 of the comments they've made. So the first one, I'm a teacher with 20 years experience, and I was absolutely terrified at the idea of using technology. That was a common theme for a lot of our teachers, right? They were really, really established in online, in a face-to-face session. But when it came to transferring that knowledge and expertise online, they were just terrified, right? And I think this project really, really supported that, transference of that skill set and knowledge to online setting. And, they really appreciated that. And I think that's the thing I would take away from this, right? It's, just because you've got competency in one area doesn't mean it's easy to transfer it. It just needs extra support. So taking part in collaboration has changed my life. It seems like an exaggeration, but a lot of the teachers have said, you just saved our life, right? We didn't know what to do at all online. We didn't even know how to log on to Teams, but that support, that training provided has made a big difference. Another teacher said, my delivery online has become so much more student-centered. One of the problems we found was a lot of the teachers, they were not confident with doing online sessions, right? So what they were doing is they were just going through the PowerPoint. They were the element of personality was missing, right? They were just really focused on just reading the PowerPoints, and it wasn't student focused. It was just about getting through the session, and they were just conscious of being on camera. So that's the training we provided, just gave them that space for them to think about what they're doing, making it a bit more student focused. And also another teacher said using OneNote to organize learners' work and provide effective feedback has made online teaching feel much more structured. I mean, if you think about online learning, right, a lot of the learners, what do they do with the work they do? Do they just email it back to you, or do they send it back as a private message? It's not, it's all over the place. But using OneNote, it just gave them that organization that they needed to put all the work in one place and track progress.
Yeah, and the point I would make about the middle one is that teachers were exhausted. It's exhausting if you're not engaging with students and putting them into breakout rooms and giving them opportunities to collaborate. It's like our sessions are 90 minutes long, and people were on their knees from just lecturing for 90 minutes. So, and something that did occur and happen with us, and I'd be really interested to hear if any of the rest of you use Teams, was that we were growing with Teams because we were desperately waiting for Teams to catch up. We were a Microsoft college, and so we made the decision early on that we would, as a college, use Teams and not Google, not Zoom. But Teams was running to catch up. They didn't have breakout rooms until Christmas. And so we were so excited and waiting for this. And I have expert status, this kind of member of a community with Microsoft. So we got an opportunity to trial these things before it was rolled out to the public. And we knew it was going to be wonderful, and we just couldn't wait. So the great breakthrough was putting the students into breakout rooms and getting them to use whiteboard while they were in there. So it was a really interesting journey for all of us.
And I think that's really important. The teachers could see that we were learning as well. We were part of the process. It's not like we were the experts. We were the experts, but they could see that, we were updating our skill set and knowledge, and, it was a journey for us as well. Right. So what the students have said. So students were really, at the beginning of the lockdown, students were really disengaged. Like, it's just online teaching. A lot of them were just not switching the cameras on. They weren't doing any work. They'll just log on to the session and they just, go back to sleep, right? So we tried to make it as effective as possible, that the sessions that, make sure the teachers had the right training. So some of them have said, I would say online teaching is better than usual classes, right? A lot of them at the end of the session have said that they preferred online sessions instead of face-to-face. And that was quite surprising to us because, students were not really engaged at the beginning. So this is quite a big, massive jump for them. Nora?
That's pretty much it. I think next slide, please, as well.
Should we go through all of the points? Or should we just go?
Well, oh yeah, so what the students said, sorry. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. That was a really interesting one, that a lot of students said that they now found online classes better than the usual classes. And when they were asked to elaborate on that, they said they loved the idea that they could get up in the morning, log in, be with their friends, enjoy some really active collaboration, and not leave the house. And they were quite reluctant about the idea, why do we have to come back? Particularly when we were back full time, because they were still really enjoying that mixed. We had a mixed delivery model for a while where we came back very gradually, and they had one face-to-face and one online session. The great thing that we've discovered and that we will be keeping is using OneNote. So they can now revisit OneNote if they miss out on anything important. And that was really useful for us to understand as well, that OneNote would become something we would keep. And I believe that we're learning a lot more and at a much faster rate than we would have done in class. Now that was fascinating. I just was blown away by the idea that this was happening when we look back and consider our own starting points, our own as well. It was that was incredible, and a faster rate. I mean, it made us feel maybe we should stay online.
Shall I go to the next slide?
Yes,
no, do you want to go?
Yeah, and finally, I mean, just next steps where we'll go. So we'll share our training sessions with the wider college group. And building on this experience, we're now back in the classroom. We will be keeping the best things that worked online. And we did survey the project members about this, and it was pretty much unanimous that OneNote and Teams assignments in particular to organize and monitor assessment is a brilliant tool. Why throw it out now when we're back in the classroom? It's a brilliant way of monitoring the students' work and keeping track. And indeed, I have students myself who have ADHD and dyslexia, and they just love Teams assignments. They want to be able to check in and see what is still outstanding, what, tick off their work across all their subjects. And so we'll be continuing to use that to organize and monitor assessments, and Teams chat for communication. It's a brilliant tool, and all the students have it on their phone now, and they can ask you a question and know that you'll get back to them, within an hour, pretty much.
I think that's the key challenge, isn't it? So we've learned a lot of things to do online. How do we keep it? How do you keep that knowledge, keep that experience, and move it forward next year when we go back face to face? And I think that's one of the things we have to look at, right?
Yeah, but I think
put it behind and just move on.
Okay, can I step in there and say thank you very much? We've run a little bit over time, but I think that's fine because we've got a joint presentation coming up next, so we've got a little bit of wriggle room in this session.
Okay.
Thank you. Have you got anything more you want to add?
We're done.
Just a final point that a lot of our project members now are going to become Microsoft Innovative Experts. It's something that they would never have foreseen this time last year. The idea that they would have expert status to do with something digital. Some people have never, as you say, Asmal, they had difficulty just logging in. So it's been an incredible journey for them.
This journey has been really long, hasn't it, Nora and Asmal?
Yeah, has indeed.
Long journey.
And the opportunity this project has given for them to collaborate and to talk to each other and support each other, that has made the learning that they've done with you so much richer. And all of the appendices in this report have got all the presentations that Nora and Asmal put together. They've been really generous and shared everything that they've done. So if anyone wants to look at that, that would be absolutely, fantastic for us to think.
Yes, please do.
This would have a wider reach.
Thank you. We've got a question. Paul's got his hands raised.
Oh,
Hi. I'm away a little bit short time. It's only a quick one, really, and that was, I just wondered from what you were saying about the way in which particularly the learners reacted to it, whether you've got any plans or any thoughts to consider moving forward with some online only classes alongside all your going back to face-to-face.
That's a really interesting question, actually, Paul, but it's beyond our power to do that. But God forbid, but I know that there are contingency plans, of course, for the idea that we might have to, would be, forced upon us. But what do you think, Asmal? There is a feeling, isn't there, that we are looking at this model, particularly for some subjects. Some subjects we're just glad to get back in the classroom. For English, like what we did, ours would be very useful.
I mean, online learning is good, but it's no substitute for face-to-face learning. So we have to be quite careful in, how far we take it. I think for revision classes or catch-up sessions, we can have online sessions, but for main delivery, I think should be face-to-face.
I think there'll be different models throughout the country, won't there? Now we've been so exposed to online learning, and there's some chat coming through where people are talking about doing perhaps online courses, face-to-face courses separately, hybrid courses. I think the best thing for us to do now is, first of all, can we have a round of applause for Nora and Asmal?
Thank you.
Hey. Thank you very much. It's been great working with you guys. Matt, if you can start screen sharing, I think what we'll do is if we could have a general chat about online learning for the last 10 minutes of this session. We should have time for that because Matt and Jan are from two completely different organisations and in different parts of the country and have worked so well together. I'm going to hand over to them to tell you more about their project now, and then we'll go into a Q&A after that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Calvert from Shipley College, and my partner in crime is Matt.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Gordon from Waltham Forest College in North East London.
So do you want to start, Matt?
No, not really. No, I'm joking. Hello, everyone. And yeah, thanks to Nora and Asma. We kind of met them before. Obviously, we're linked with them in terms of being looked after by Sue. And just thanks for that, for those details you showed us. I'm definitely interested in exploring more of that. We obviously sort of got together as a cluster group, and it was interesting to see some parallels coming across the two different projects, because we use Teams at Waltham Forest College too, although Jan uses Google and stuff. We started off, just to go back to this idea of online approaches, we started off this whole project quite a while ago, actually. And it was before the OTLA scene sort of came onto the picture for us, because Jan and I, we're both advanced practitioners as well, and we met at an AP event in London. I've just forgotten when it was, Jan. Was it 2019? It was quite a while back.
Yeah.
And we got together because we were put into, or given the option to go into different groups to talk about different projects we wanted to take forward as APs. And it was only us two, really, maybe one or two other people sort of floating around about it, but only us two were committed to doing something about webinars for students. And this is obviously, you remember, pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, pre any of that stuff, back, to what life used to be like. I can barely remember it. And the idea was there to use webinars as a way to engage students in GCSE English. We both do GCSE English language, different specifications. I do AQA, Jan does Excel, and the idea was for to get students involved in this webinar idea, because I'd done teacher training, some other bits and pieces in the private sector using different webinar platforms. We were just starting to introduce Teams in the college there, but obviously everything was face to face at the time. And Jan was doing it to sort of upskill yourself, Jan, weren't you? You're thinking, I want to get into some of the digital stuff who are hot on it at the moment. And Jan's a well experienced, practitioner in terms of teaching. I've only come back into it really over the last 3 years. So I thought, right, brilliant. I can pull some ideas off her. I'll give her a hand in some of the techie stuff. And we took it from there. So it was a project based pretty much on that. It wasn't quite back of a beer mat stuff, but it was back of a coffee, a napkin or something. We went through this idea of, okay, let's do these recorded webinars. We'll sort of deliver them in our sessions, sort of co-deliver, and we'll take it from there. So just moving on to this idea, where this is where we are, in case you don't know, because everybody of course knows where London is, as you should, and Bradford up north, apparently it's somewhere just a few miles north of Watford, the Watford Gap, just before Scotland apparently, and that's the north of the country. So this idea of north-south collaboration was physical, obviously, because we'd met face to face. We discussed this sort of idea, and then we were continuing this sort of project online, of course, and that's where the majority of our communication was happening. So through Zoom and other stuff like that, WhatsApp, and Dan paid us a visit as well. So we're bringing two similar but obviously different colleges together. We're both sort of general FE, if I can speak for you guys, Jan, but sort of different sort of scale, offering different sort of subjects, also similar ones, and very different student populations, as you might imagine. Most of our guys are drawn from, of course, northeast London, but mainly the sort of local area, but from a variety of different backgrounds in terms of heritage. So obviously East European, South Asian, sort of Indian, Pakistan, Bangladeshi, and everywhere basically, as North London is a bit like. So that's where it all started off from. And we chose, obviously, as I mentioned, we're doing different specs, but we went for a text that we all know, in terms of most of us, either if you've read it, if you haven't read it, I bet you know something about a vampire, or how to kill him, that sort of stuff. So we went for Dracula, and this is some of the stuff taken from these attempts at jokes were taken from the webinar section. So the idea, we took Dracula, a well-known text, 19th century English, applicable really for both specifications, obviously relevant skills for the students, and we started it off on that. And I've been talking far too long.
Yeah, so the first part of the project was I made a webinar which I shared with Matt in Waltham Forest. For me personally, it was a good thing, as Matt said, I wanted to upskill, so I had a real authentic audience, and this was actually a theme that ran through the work that we were doing, the importance of having a real purpose and audience. It became more and more apparent how central that has been actually to motivating our students. And so I shared resources in a webinar with the idea that Matt's students would respond. Could you go to the next slide, please, Matt? And what we'd do is we'd do some cross-college peer drafting and use, I suppose we were looking to combine traditional methods that we'd use in the classroom, but do it in an online way. And so this was sort of what we started off doing, and this was kind of then suddenly caught up in the lockdown situation. It became, you know, more and more pertinent to work in this way. So we swapped over responses, and our students marked the London responses and sent them some brutal feedback. And it was really interesting.
Brutal but fair, maybe.
It was really interesting because they got to know the criteria, obviously, much more. And they, I think they just got stuck into it more than they do when they're doing it in class, because they always tend to be very nice to each other in class. Whereas this sort of vaguely competitive thing came up, like, you know, Northerners, as gritty Northerners, or, you know, show those soft Southerners what to do, I think, with gratitude. So, you know, the students were really looking at saying, well, they've made a point, but there's no quote there, so they're not going to get the next level up. And the aim, of course, for us as tutors was that they would then put that into their own learning, and we could then trace their progress through doing this. So we developed the project, and Matt did a webinar on Mark of the Beast and sent it up to us, and we sent responses down, at which point staff in my department started to get really involved. Sue kept saying to us, you know, the reach is important, get more and more people involved. And actually we used Mark of the Beast as a stimulation for doing some imaginative writing then in the second half term, sort of adapting what we had previously planned to then look at a theme of monsters and monstrosities. Which was sort of a bit of a spur of the moment thing that just came out of Mark of the Beast, but just about everyone in our department then got involved in doing this work. And then at that point, do you want to take the next slide, Matt?
Yeah, no worries. Cheers, Jan. And Jan was saying, or she said something there about students getting stuck in, and it was absolutely the case in terms of, I think, both sides getting stuck into the actual tasks themselves. And here's the task in terms of referring back to Dracula. So you've got this creating atmosphere of dread, evaluation, targeting student skills, obviously applicable across anything you do in English language or lit. It doesn't matter really the spec. And we were targeting obviously the higher order skills. And what you can see on the screen actually is that idea of the online learning approach and also the collaboration. So on the left side of it is on the left side of your screen, that handwritten purple ink is what we would say the traditional way. So what you're looking at there is a Shipley College student response to that question, JW, at the top, and then the annotation and feedback provided by a Waltham Forest College student. And that's a bit more traditional, isn't it? Because it's pen and paper. The online bit comes in when obviously you scan it over to Jan, as we did, and then she takes it forward. And on the right-hand side, you can see a bit more of an online idea there, where you've got again the same response from the Shipley student, but underneath it in the italics you've got 3 different students there responding to it in an online forum. So we're using Teams as a live session. So there are students who have got a shared document on Word and then typing in their particular responses to it. I'm just going back to this point. I'm sorry, forgive me everyone, but on Jan's point about getting stuck in, there was a great level of students doing that, you know, whether it was based on north-south stuff or whether it was just interesting because there was another audience there. It was a mixture of both, I think. And, you know, we might call it student engagement or enhanced student engagement to talk, you know, into a pedagogical aspect of it. But the stuck in, I think, covers it a bit. Jan mentioned. Just a very quick one for you, because we're talking about teaching learning assessment in terms of the online, and people just after the other guy's presentation were talking about different platforms, and I mentioned the differences between Ben and I in terms of Google and stuff. Can you do us a favor, please? Just type in the chat section for us and just answer that question. So what platforms and methods do you use for giving students feedback? Asma and Nora are talking about this idea, as we heard of, you know, this communication, ongoing communication between colleagues. So the question I'm asking here, or we're asking here, is what platforms, online platforms, you use and methods for getting and giving students feedback on their work, having a look at some peer feedback. As I mentioned, we use Teams at Waltham College and Forms, which Asmal and Nora were talking about. We also use for surveys, but for quizzes, longer answers, typing, writing exercises, and that kind of thing. I'll just pause, let those responses come in. Sue, Jan, I can't see the chat at the moment. Could you give us a shout at some of those?
Yeah, there's lots coming in, Matt. People using Teams, Google, WebEx, Moat.
WebEx. Moat I've not heard of.
Such a variety here of
ones. What sort of methods in terms of students feedback? Or anybody mentioning?
More just putting what platforms they use. So if everyone would like to put in about methods, that would be good. We've just got platforms so far.
No worries. So for example, if you're using WebEx, which I've used a few times, how are you getting feedback for the students over to them? Are you showing screen? Are you typing it out?
Flipgrid.
Flipgrid is a great one.
Screen record and send links.
Nice one. I think you can do that on most platforms.
UR conversations.
All right. Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one.
We leave feedback via docs and rubrics, private chat and group chat. They're coming in so fast, Matt. I can't read.
Yeah, it's right. I actually closed the chat thing. I find it too distracting. So.
Yeah.
Would we be able to save this chat?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm just thanks everyone for that. Carry on typing if you can. I'm just going to carry on talking. Thanks, Sue, for coming in there. I mean, what I'm interested in both things, or we're interested is both in terms of the platform, obviously the method. Flipgrid I've not used myself yet, and Jan is the expert when it comes to Google Meet. But Flipgrid I can certainly see the potential in terms of that feedback two ways, or screenercast or something like that, where you can students' feedback on their particular work, and indeed they can give feedback on their own work or whatever it happens to be. Just continuing on this theme very briefly again, Sujan, if you can just give us a few comments that are coming out of the chat section. Next question for everyone else is, what platforms and methods do you use for students' peer-to-peer feedback? So the documents I was showing you earlier was the peer-to-peer stuff. Shipley students work with a Waltham Forest College students feedback on it, annotation, acting like an examiner. Jan, if you remember that one, a lot of students commented on that kind of thing, where they were looking at other students' responses to questions, and they felt they were put in somewhat of a driving seat. It goes back to this getting stuck in student engagement idea, because they were providing sometimes brutally honest feedback to similar kind of students, or a similar age group, if nothing else. And they were more aware, and Jan and I were talking about this. This is where for us the project, I think, really took off in terms of two practitioners exchanging ideas and TLA and practice and all the rest of it. Is we were seeing a different level of engagement to students who were taking a much more critical eye on their own work, their own thinking, their own reading comprehension, and of course their writing as well. So they were more aware of a potential student, but they're also looking, what's the word, with a different, from a different perspective, a different stance on a typical student's response, and then acting like an examiner. They said, it felt good, or it felt quite good to look at somebody else's work and critique it, as well as, be critical. So there was not just this lack of quotation here, or you could have said this, but that sort of thinking. And the challenge for me, I think, slightly less so for Jan, but the challenge for me at this point, this is roughly about a third of the way or so from into the project really, was to try and get those two dichotomies together. In other words, students being able to critically review somebody else's work, and thinking in that same way about their own work, their own writing or reading comprehension kind of answers. So the idea for me was to try and bring those two ideas together. So in that case, why don't you do that to your own work? Why don't you, take a step back, read it before the timer goes off or whatever the timed response we're doing, read it and then think, oops, better put in a decent quote here. I haven't explained that very well. I need to expand on this. That kind of idea was the next step challenge.
Should we move on to the next part of the project, Matt?
Yes, go for it. Dan, over to you, mate.
So what we did after Christmas actually was a little bit of a change, because we realised we were going to have to adapt our original plans, and we decided to write letters to each other. This is some of the things that students said. We've actually, I think from Shipley, which is a small college, but very multicultural, northern city is Bradford, but quite a small college. And I think we had 82 letters sent down to London from students. And it was absolutely amazing.
It's brilliant.
And you can see some of the things that the students said. And this is where I said, the theme of having a real and authentic audience really took off here. So our students wrote to each other. The last set of letters Matt actually sent in the post, which was really nice to get an envelope with letters in. But obviously before that, it was digital. And you can just see a few of the things that students said. And I asked both students and staff about how they got on, and students said that they had really enjoyed the online lessons because they'd got more personal space and they felt that they did get more done, but they really liked the face-to-face because they're more motivated by the atmosphere and other students in class, and obviously then there's no network problems. We've followed a couple of students particularly. So at Shipley, we followed Eliza and Abby, who did the project all the way through. And they were really positive about the collaboration and communicating with other people. They said we got confidence from meeting other people. Eliza said, which was quite interesting really, the way they responded to the letters. They said it's like connecting to older times when people didn't have a phone. And one student in the class said it's more powerful with a letter. You can describe your emotions more. Yeah. So they started to really reflect on how they were communicating, and the links that they did build up actually across the country during lockdown. And Matt and I have got this sort of fantastic documentation really of how students felt about their online learning during lockdown this year.
Record of the times, isn't it, really?
It really is, yeah. Now, the other tutors were very, very positive about the letter writing as well, and that really took off across the college. One tutor said, we did, up at Shipley, we did Google Forms, and Matt's done, the Microsoft things, constantly getting feedback, and, that's something that we're definitely going to continue using. But students said that they really appreciate the real context and knowing it was an actual student they were writing to, heightened their enthusiasm and focus. We sort of concluded really that although we felt we were quite well set up, we've been using Google Classroom and stuff for years, the resources that we've used and the motivation we've got from sort of supporting each other across college, and the way all of us have been thrown into this sort of situation, digital learning has now become the new norm, hasn't it? And we've all upskilled so much. Yeah. But it was actually quite touching that it was the old-fashioned letter writing activity that really captured people's imagination. So I would definitely recommend, I've seen in the chat a few other people saying anyone wants to do a collaboration. I think that, it's worked really well for us, and I definitely recommend that kind of thing. So I'm aware that we're quite short of time now, Sue, aren't we? So can we just move on to the concluding slides? Do you want to finish off with the more qualitative stuff, Matt?
Yeah, cheers, Jan. I'm just flicking through these last slides because, as usual, I've been over talking, and just flicking back again to these comments from the students from the lessons and stuff like that, and just reflecting what Jan was saying there. You can see some of the quotations there, and I'm going to combine a thought, if that's possible, with across all of them really. Those last two ones where it's connecting to old times, didn't people have a phone? Sorry, the one above it, confidence from meeting more powerful letter. There really was. And it's not a cliche to say it is this collection of letters that we've got is a document of the times, really, because you've got in there some really personal responses. You know, we look at sometimes, especially for GCSE, it becomes a bit of a hackneyed phrase, you know, reader response, writer's intention, all that sort of stuff. You can really hear these students, these people's voices describing their emotions, and not just about lockdown, but also about studying English, their own background, this idea of a very real, authentic audience reading this sort of information. You know, they sort of had a brush with that, if you like, with the exchange in the peer-to-peer feedback, and that's where it became a lot more personal, but also slightly disconnected, because of sending a letter is like that, isn't it? Really, unless you handwrite it, especially with typing, it has that element to it. So this idea of meeting and connecting to other people, connecting to other people all the time, came through because we did get them together online. You know, the intention was to bring them together online, get them to meet, as it were, face to face, or with or without cameras, and then go on a good old-fashioned, what I call a field trip. You know, we're going to go up to Shipley. I was going to take these East London kids up to a beautiful part of the UK, which 90% of them, 95%, had never visited anywhere near or even experienced that.
I'm really sorry, we are out of time. I'm going to have
no worries.
stop
I'll just
you.
wait to
There's loads of really positive feedback coming into chat as well, especially about the letters. Thank you so much, both of you.
No worries.
If people have questions and you pop them into chat, I will build them out to Jan and Matt, or Sue and myself.
Matt, just whip through your final slides so that people can see them. If you like.
I mean, I'm so sorry because I've been rabbiting away, but I was actually just going to finish on that point, because the idea was we were getting feedback, and it was a phrase I'm going to steal or magpie away from Nora and Asmol, was this idea of this reflection sort of in session as well as on session. This was happening with the students. So this is a shot, and I haven't got time to go through all the details, but we've got qualitative as well as quantitative information and ongoing feedback that helped us develop as practitioners, and definitely helped the students become more engaged with the subject itself. And there is a brief summary and what we've found, what we've learnt, and indeed what Jan's already reflected on, this idea of digital learners becoming a new norm. But there is also the traditional element left. Thank you, everybody, and apologies.
No, thank you. Thanks, Matt and Jan. Round of applause.
Yes, thank you very much. It's such an interesting project.